One of the big developing stories this week, when former President Jacob Zuma returns to the Pietermaritzburg High Court, he will launch a plea to have State Prosecutor Billy Downing recuse himself. A 141-page affidavit submitted by his legal team details allegations of political interference, impartiality, and the unlawful disclosure of information to a journalist. So by attempting to bring into question the conduct of the State Prosecutor, Zuma, the strategy is to win eventually an acquittal on the grounds that a fair trial cannot be conducted. He is expected to launch an appeal if this plea doesn't go his way, resulting in another inevitable delay of the trial that has taken almost 20 years to reach this stage. So is this another delaying tactic or simply an accused exercising his rights? Let's get you some perspective now. Stellenbosch University Professor of Political Science, Amanda Gouws, joins us now for some analysis. Prof, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning, and I think that's an important point to just clarify from the get-go. The former president is well within his rights to raise this recusal plea in terms of criminal law.
Yes, good morning. So he's doing it in terms of Section 106(4) of the Criminal Procedures Act, because he believes that Billy Downing, the prosecutor, cannot be unbiased and not make a judgment about him, because he's already made up his mind that Zuma is corrupt and that Zuma is guilty. So he's asking for Downing to be removed and a new prosecutor to be instituted. This is rather problematic because, again, it's going to be time-consuming. A new prosecutor will have to prepare himself for the case. And one needs to ask the question, Zuma has been the president of the country. He is very widely known, and everybody in this country probably has an opinion about Zuma. So how do you find someone that is not already familiar with the long history of corruption that's been made public in the media? So he probably will also claim that he's been tried by the media. But anybody, a new prosecutor, will also be familiar with the long history of Zuma and corruption. So in my opinion, it is actually a tactic to delay the court case.
Yeah, it's very interesting here. The former president saying, and I want to read an excerpt of what he had to say through court papers in court last week. He says, Billy Downing has, quote, wittingly or unwittingly turned the prosecution into a personal legacy project of his own rather than a pursuit of justice based on an impartial and independent mind. I mean, it's very interesting to read something like that and then also listen to his lawyer, Thabani Masuku, say in court that the former president is ready. He has always been ready. This is not a delaying tactic. He wants to let the trial get underway.
Well, I think what we also need to take into consideration here is the history of Schabir Shaik, right? When Schabir Shaik was tried, and that is nearly 20 years ago, the finding in that case was that there was a mutually beneficial relationship between Shaik and Zuma. So, or a generally corrupt relationship. Now, relationship works in two ways. It's not, it's between the two of them. So if one is guilty, the other one is also supposed to be guilty. And the question is why Zuma was not actually tried at the same time as Shaik. Since then, he has been using every stalling tactic in the book not to get his day in court, even though he very often claims that he wants his day in court.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult, but now he's accusing Downing of making this his legacy project, which I don't think is the case. I think that Downing is just very familiar with the case. He's familiar with because he was the prosecutor in the Schabir Shaik case. He is familiar with the facts. He's familiar with the witnesses. And so he is and also very determined to give Zuma his day in court. And Zuma knows that if this is the case, he most probably will be found guilty.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned Schabir Shaik because it was Billy Downing who prosecuted Schabir Shaik in Durban all those years ago. And one just wonders how much of that will play into the former president's argument that Billy Downer is biased against him, given that he was involved in the prosecution of Schabir Shaik?
Well, I think he is making that argument. And we know that he has also benefited Schabir Shaik after he was found guilty to get him out of jail through making this case that he is dying of kidney failure, and he is still alive today. So again, there is this relationship. But any new prosecutor will have to look at that case and will have to take into consideration the outcome in the Schabir Shaik case.
I mean, arguments to be made here, Prof, for either one of the outcomes of this recusal plea. Let's say it is successful. It means that he now has grounds for an acquittal, isn't it? If it's not successful, it means more delays, possibly going into months or years, because then he can take it up on appeal all the way to the Constitutional Court.
Exactly. And so, you know, even if it's, you know, because he's not actually asking for a new prosecutor, he's actually asking to be acquitted.
Yeah.
And like you say, this, if he's not going to get that, he's going to take it. He's already said he will take it on appeal. And then, yes, it can go to the appeals court, it can go to the Constitutional Court, and that can take years.
Prof, are there other cases that come to mind when you think of this so-called Stalingrad tactic that has been deployed by the former president, although he will deny that it has been deployed? Are there other cases where there have been delaying tactics of this nature, and it's actually gotten to the stage where the prosecutor has been taken on this recusal plea?
Well, I think that the most recent is the Zondo Commission. So this is not in a court, but he actually is under the obligation to appear in front of the Zondo Commission. And we've seen what he's done. He has said that he is not going to appear. The only time that he went there, he walked out. He's been asked numerous times to come back, and every time he finds a reason why he can't come back. So it is doing the same thing about Zondo that he's doing about Billy Downer. He said that he and Zondo were friends and that Zondo cannot be unbiased and impartial and give him a fair hearing. Mm-hmm. And then what he does is he rallies public opinion and he rallies his supporters. We see now that Ace Makashule has said that, you know, he will take the whole Free State to Pietermaritzburg for this court case of Zuma. And in the case of the Zondo Commission, you know, he's also had the EFF at his home, he's had Makashule and others at his home, and he is stating a case that you know, these supporters of him can see that he is not a corrupt man, that he is being persecuted by public opinion and by the media. And so we see that this was another Stalingrad technique that is used, and he's been using it throughout, you know, the time before he was the president. He could not be prosecuted while he was the president, and now that he's not the president anymore, he's continuing this tactic. So it's very useful for him. It's very beneficial because it does delay court cases, and we need to think about the costs here, right? Every time witnesses have to come, some have to be subpoenaed. It's all a time-consuming process, and it is on the side of the state that is now prosecuting him. It's very costly, and it's costly for him as well. And he's already pleaded that he is insolvent and that he cannot pay for the court case.
Yeah. Prof, you know, what will be going on in the mind of the court this week when the former president does go back to court? Are all of these things issues that the court takes into consideration? Does it take into consideration that it's taken us 20 years to get to the stage of the trial, and that, you know, in the interests of justice, it should get underway? How will the court be approaching not only the recusal plea, but the context surrounding the Jacob Zuma corruption case?
Well, you know, this whole very lengthy saga that's gone on for nearly 20 years is the backdrop to this case. But we need to understand that Courts have to be impartial. They have to take this case as though this is the first time it is in front of the court, and it has to deal only with the facts and the evidence. So I think this is what the people involved, the prosecutor and the defense, wants to do. But every time Zuma finds a reason why this shouldn't happen, because he knows that he will probably be found guilty, and this is a way for him to prevent that. But I mean, it's the contradiction here, right? He always says, I'm ready, I want my day in court. And then when it comes to the day in court, he finds a new reason why the case cannot proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor Amanda Gouws, thanks very much for your time this morning, giving us some perspective on this case as the former president heads back to the Pietermaritzburg High Court just this week. Prof. Amanda Gouws is with Stellenbosch University.